hope you're sitting comfortably and are ready to listen to chapter 3 of Sam Wu is Not Afraid of Spiders by Katie and Kevin Tsang. Now, chapter 3 is called Spiders Are Not for Snuggling. The entire class took in a deep breath as one, like we suddenly all shared a gigantic lung. Mr. Dougal walked to the front of the class and then he put the spider down on the table. I wanted to back away, but it is almost impossible to do that when you are sitting in a chair that is attached to your desk. So instead, I just leaned back as far as I could. "This is Tulip," Mr. Dougal said affectionately as he stroked the back of the giant spider like it was a kitten. The spider was practically the size of a kitten, so it was easy for him to pet it. Tulip is a Goliath bird-eater tarantula. "It eats birds?" Zoe said, her eyes huge. "Zoe, don't call out without raising your hand," said Miss Winkleworth, but she was staring at the spider with eyes almost as big as Zoe's. "Great question," Mr. Dougal replied. "Goliath bird-eater tarantulas can, in fact, eat birds, but they usually eat insects." One of the 6th graders stepped forward. "But they sometimes eat other animals like rats or even snakes." "Snakes?" I thought of Fang. In a fight between Tulip and Fang, I wasn't sure who would win. I gulped. I never thought I'd come across an animal fiercer than Fang. Another one of the 6th graders spoke up. "Goliath bird-eater tarantulas are the biggest spiders in the world. This one is an average size." "An average size?" The spider was bigger than my hand, maybe even bigger than my face. Not that I was going to get close enough to compare the size of my face to the size of the spider. Even just thinking about having my face near to it made my palms a little sweaty. Mr. Dougal carefully picked the tarantula up again and held it out for us to see. It was light brown with black patterns on it. "Any other questions, class?" said Miss Winkleworth, who was standing very close to the door. I raised my hand. "I thought spiders had 8 legs," I said. This was something everyone knew. "But this one looks like it has..." I paused and counted. 10 or even 12. "Very observant," said Mr. Dougal. "As you can see, she has 8 legs as well as what looks like 2 other sets." He used his other hand to point at what I thought was another pair of legs and explained. "These are called pedipalps. They're like pincers. Scorpions also have them." Despite my best efforts to stay very still, I shuddered. "And these," he said, pointing to the things closest to the tarantula's face, "are the chelicera, which are similar to jaws." "Her jaws are outside her mouth," I said. I was so overwhelmed by this information, I forgot to raise my hand. Miss Winkleworth gave a warning cough. "They aren't exactly jaws, just similar to jaws. They're connected to the venom gland." Mr. Dougal went on, like this was perfectly normal, not at all a terrifying thing. Then he smiled at us. "Does anyone know what venom is?" Bernard's hand shot up into the air. "Yes." "Venom is a kind of poison that animals can use to protect themselves." "Precisely," said Mr. Dougal. "But don't worry, tarantulas rarely bite humans. And if you are unlucky enough to get bitten, the venom isn't any more dangerous than a wasp's skin." "Has Tulip ever bitten anyone?" I asked. "Sam," said Miss Winkleworth, "if you speak out one more time without raising your hand, I'm going to have to put your name on the board." "Not in all the time I've known her," said Mr. Dougal, stroking the back of the giant spider again. It was impossible to see if Tulip was enjoying being petted. She didn't purr like a cat or anything. She just sat there staring at us with her 8 eyes. 8 eyes! I started to ask another question. but then remembered that Mrs. Winkleworth had said and put my hand up in the air. "Yes?" asked Mr. Dougal, smiling at me. "How long have you known Tulip?" I asked. This was important. If Mr. Dougal had only known Tulip for a little while, who knew if she could be trusted? "I've known Tulip her whole life," said Mr. Dougal. "She's 4 now and will hopefully live for many more years to come." Regina put her hand in the air. "Can I hold her?" she asked. My mouth dropped open. "I'm afraid not," said Mr. Dougal. "I have years of experience holding tarantulas, but ones like Tulip can occasionally get aggressive, so it isn't a good idea for someone inexperienced to hold her." Aggressive? What did he mean? Tulip could get aggressive? Why had he brought an aggressive giant spider into our classroom? "But you can come up here and pet her if you are very gentle," said Mr. Dougal. Regina hopped up and went straight to the tarantula. I couldn't believe it. She very gently ran one finger down the top of its back and wrinkled her nose. "She's so furry," she exclaimed. "Almost like a hamster or something, but bristlier." "And bigger," I muttered. "Hi, Tulip," Regina cooed at the spider. "Do you want to snuggle?" "Of course she doesn't want to snuggle," I burst out. "She's a spider!" Suddenly, the spider turned towards Regina, lifted up on her hind legs and bared her huge fangs at her. Regina took a step back. I was almost 100% certain that Tulip was going to pounce, but she just stayed in Mr. Dougal's hands with her front legs up in the air and her fangs out for everyone to see. "Oh, settle down there, Tulip," said Mr. Dougal, stepping away from the desk. He turned to one of the 6th graders who was holding a plastic container. "Here, let's put Tulip back in her carrying case." He slid Tulip into the case where she landed with a thump and then scurried around. Just to be safe, I shut my eyes. I wished I was wearing one of the helmets they wear on Space Blasters, or even better, a whole Space Blasters protective suit. "Nothing to worry about," said Mr. Dougal in that fake cheerful voice adults use when there is definitely something to worry about. "Just stay calm. Tulip can sense all the excitement." "I can sense that Sam Woozer is scared of the spider," sneered Ralph with a snort. "His eyes are closed. He's too scared to even look at her." Ralph was sitting behind me, so I had no idea how he knew this. I turned around and opened my eyes as wide as I could as I faced Ralph. "I'm not," I said. "I was just blinking." I did a few slow blinks to emphasise this fact. Ralph Philip Zinkerman III was definitely still my nemesis. "Settle down, class," said Miss Winkleworth. I don't think she heard Ralph teasing me, and I wasn't going to tell tales. "This has certainly been exciting," she added, sounding out of breath like she'd just run a marathon, even though she'd only been standing at the door. "Perhaps it's time for you all to go back to the 6th grade classrooms." Now that my eyes were open, I could see that Tulip was still scurrying around the container, and she did not look happy. Well, she looked about the same as when she had come in, and she didn't look happy then either. "Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Dougal or the 6th graders?" said Miss Winkleworth. At least 15 hands went up in the air. Tulip lifted a leg and tapped it against the side of her container, like she too wanted to ask something. "Oh dear, that's a lot of questions," said Miss Winkleworth. Then she brightened. "How about we spend the afternoon discussing what we learned from Mr. Dougal? Then we can write down our questions and send them over later. Does that sound good to you, Mr. Dougal?" "Excellent plan," said Mr. Dougal. "Now, as you say, we should probably get back to our class. Tulip seems to be uncharacteristically agitated. I think she wants to be back in her tank. This is the furthest she has ever travelled. I wondered who had thought this would be a good idea. What do we say, class? Said Miss Winkleworth, as Mr. Dougal and the 4 sixth graders made their way to the door. Thank you, we all chorused together, and then the classroom door slammed shut behind them. I thought that would be the last I'd see of Tulip the tarantula. That's the end of chapter 3. I hope you enjoyed listening to chapter 3 as much as I enjoyed reading it. Make sure you keep checking back for number 4, which I'll be reading soon.